everybody, it's Stephen and Walter back for another episode of So Chatty for January the 16th, 2026. Hope everybody's been having a good week and you're keeping warm, because for us here, right now, it's balmy. It's -8. When I got up, it was -15 Celsius. And we've had a lot of snow yesterday, and we're still digging our way out of it. And when I say we, I mean Walter. So, any comments about the weather from you?
No.
Yeah, okay.
It's nice and
nice
and white right now.
That's right. It's very pretty. Very cold, but very pretty. Okay, so what have I been working on? Sneaky peeky. Here we go. Yeah, I'm still working on my Quilt of Valor that I'm designing myself. This is the inner section of it around the panel. I'm now working on the next rows. There's going to be a thin border all the way around that, and then there's going to be more blocks around that. And right now I'm working out the math, and quilt math hard is all I can say. So yeah, we're going to an in-person sew day tomorrow, which is Saturday at the time of recording this, with Walter's group of cronies, the garment sewers. Ew, icky, ooh. Not really. It's a good group, small group. So I'm going to be working on this, on that quilt then as well. So what have you been working on?
Well, I'm still trying to finish one shirt, which I'll probably finish at the sew day tomorrow. And then I've got another shirt cut out for if I run out of stuff to do tomorrow. But that wasn't really the intention. I was going to start working on something else. But
where'd you cut the shirt out?
Down here.
Because I got thinking about that the other night.
I moved all your stuff over to the iron table while I was cutting out.
And it was all there. I didn't even notice it was moved. My God, you're getting good at that. Usually there's a trail.
So, yeah, so I cut out another shirt only because it's easy for me to do. I didn't want to start a project that I wasn't familiar with at sew day. So,
yeah. Well, the way the sew days work anyways, you get there, like they start at 10, but everybody's sitting around talking, drinking coffee until about 11. Then you get your sewing machine out, and before you know it, it's time to pack up your sewing machine and go home again. But anyways, yep, so we've got that. Okay, announcements. Sewing with Stephen Wednesdays, as usual. You know the drill. Links in the show notes below. Pop-up sew day, the next one is going to be, right now I'm pretty much sure is going to be, and I think it's the 31st of January, which is the last Saturday in January. You can check that on your calendar. I will send out stuff. I don't know, I got something itchy eye. I don't know, get a spoon and pop up my eyeball and clean it.
Maybe you have dry eyes.
Dry eyes. No, I'm not like you, Mr. I have to wear my eye mask in the morning to keep my eyes soft and supple. Anyways, as I was saying, pop-up sew day, probably January the 31st. I'll send out notices and set it all up a few days before, as I usually do. So that's not for a couple of weeks yet, but you might want to pencil it in. Also, Russ, if you desperate for a pop-up sew day, Russ of Quilt Meets World is having a sewing shenanigans this coming Sunday, which is, what's today? Today's the 16th. It's Sunday, January the 18th. That's more for those of you that might see this past that date. And if you want more details about that, check out Quilt Meets World YouTube channel, and I believe he has the link there. And if you're on his mailing list, he's already sent out that link to everybody there as well. Let's see, other announcements. Already told you that we're going to Walter's Sew Day. What else? Oh, yes. Okay. Update on the retreat, the spring retreat. I have been working on it. I have sent out a bunch of feeler emails to possible presenters. I have one presenter that's already confirmed. I am not going to reveal who that is just yet because it's still early in the game. But I was very pleased to get this person, and I'm sure you will know who this person is as well. At the time, I've got about 6 or 7 other feelers out there. I've only had one reply back to me with a definite no, which didn't surprise me because this particular person, I looked at their schedule and yeah, they're booked. It looks like they're booked every month, like several engagements every month for the next year. So yeah, but if you don't ask, you don't know. Um, I am hoping to have John from Art East again, not so much as a speaker as an opportunity for him to catch everybody up on his latest offerings and things like that. I just sent him that email today, so I haven't heard back, but I imagine he will probably go for it, and everybody likes to hear what John has going on. And I've got a few other ones out there. So, and those are based on your suggestions. So if you have some more suggestions, please forward them to me, either in the comments or ideally to my email, and I will consider that. So I'm hoping that by the end of January, I will have all of my speakers lined up and confirmed and all of that underway. And then I can work on getting everything else organized for this and get that information out to you as to when the registration date will be and all of that kind of stuff. And of course, my retreat, for anybody who's never been to an Idiot Quilter retreat, I run them twice a year, one in the spring, one in the fall. They are a Zoom, they are not a YouTube live, and you have to register for them, but it's free. It's absolutely free, but I do ask you to register because I can only handle about 90 spots on my Zoom license. And it's also a sign that you are committed to this kind of thing. But more about that and when you can register and everything, it's not until April. And right now the dates are tentative. It could be April the 11th. It could be April the 18th. It really depends on my speakers, what works best for them. How come we got a ring going off?
Someone is at the new front door.
Okay, sorry about that. That was my latest order from Bamboo of filament. Yes, more filament. Can you ever have too much filament? Well, can you ever have too much fabric? Same diff. All right, what was I saying? Okay, so yeah, the pop-up, or not the pop-up, the retreat is coming along nicely. So we'll see. Okay, moving on. So today's topic, men, I think I entitled it Men Invade the Sewing World. All right. This is a topic we've thrown around over time, because we know that the quilting world especially, well, the sewing world too, is really dominated by females for obvious reasons. It's historical, women's place was in the home to make clothes, make quilts, do all that kind of stuff, back in the day. And that is carried over to today as well. But more and more men are being involved in it. And Maureen Tager, one of our subscribers, she suggested this. She showed me an article. Let me find the article. She sent me an article. And I have the article somewhere. Here it is. Okay, I'll show you. This is what she sent me a link for. An article that she had seen that said, "Not just a woman's hobby, why more men are picking up sewing and why you should too." And so this is a very interesting article. It talks all about the influx of men in sewing, especially in sewing. It didn't really talk so much about quilting as much about garment making. But it's a very good article. And I will probably put the link down in the show notes as well. I don't know if I've already done that. I may have. But if I haven't, I will. And you can read it for yourself. But she wanted me to look into this in more detail and possibly talk about it. So that's exactly what we are going to do. And so I looked up, as I do. That's not it. That's not it. And bear with me. I have a lot of screens open, Joe. Here we go. Here is what I found in my research about this. And I put into the AI, are men getting into quilting and sewing? Or more men? And AI came up with this. So we're going to go through what AI said and see whether or not, from our own observations and our own experience, whether or not we think this is accurate. So yes, it said there is significant and growing movement of men entering the quilting and sewing communities as of 2026. While both crafts have been traditionally viewed as female-dominated for centuries, recent data and cultural shifts indicate a notable rise in male participation. So the growth they talk about in participation in sewing and quilting, they say recent surveys indicated that men now make up approximately 15 to 16% of the sewing community. This is a substantial increase from older studies such as the 2017 Quilting in America report, which estimated male quilters at only about 1%. Okay, that's a big rise from 14 to 15% since 2017, which is 9 years ago in this. I would suspect actually the number is higher.
Yeah.
And why?
No, I would think it would be
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Why?
I think it stems from a lot of men didn't get into sewing because it was female dominated and viewed as a female thing to do because of the old days that boys didn't play with
That's right.
Barbies and stuff like that.
Boys didn't knit, boys didn't crochet or sew.
Do those types of things, and it was men were often afraid of being compartmentalized into
hard word
into being doing feminine things. But men for years have moved from like men do other things that were often considered feminine, like house cleaning and cooking and things like that. So why not move back into something like sewing, which is using machines?
Yeah, but even in the language that's used around garment sewing, women were seamstresses. Men who were in the sewing industry were tailors. And there's always been a hierarchy between those two words. Seamstress meant someone sitting in a factory in front of a sewing machine, rattling off whatever for the mass market.
Well, I thought a seamstress also meant people that made custom clothing for women.
Well, yeah, dresses and things like that. But men, as tailors, sounded more sophisticated because the equation was making a dress is easier than making a suit. Tailoring is a fine art. Sewing a dress, not so fine. It's a domestic skill that most women at one point back generations ago would have just naturally have been taught by their mothers in order to clothe the family. Now, definitely sexist, no two ways about it. But I think now those two terms have really, they don't mean what they did.
Well, not only that, I think men in the past, like Steve says, tailors were a group which were usually men that made suits for other men. Or
they made men's clothing.
And they also made, there were a lot of men that were in the sewing industry that were using industrial sewing, like making sails for sailboats or cushions for car seats or for sailboats or things like that. So they did industrial sewing.
Or upholstering.
Or upholstery, yeah.
Yeah.
So that sort of stuff was done a lot by men and women too, but a lot of men did that.
But initially more men than women.
Yeah.
I mean, today I'm sure there is pretty much the lines are blurred there, which they should be. But
like if you get into quilting or like garment sewing for men, that's more of what do you call it? An art type viewpoint, right?
Yeah,
to some degree. Like I mean, if you're making a quilt, there is a certain amount of you can make art quilts.
Yeah,
but you can also make some of your quilts require a certain amount of creativity to envision.
Yeah, But I also think back to garment sewing and men and women. I think the idea was that it was much easier, and be careful, don't want hate mail about this. It was easier for someone to sew a dress or a blouse than it was for someone to make pants or a shirt, a man's shirt, that kind of thing. And that's the difference between tailoring and seamstress.
Plus a lot of the industry in sewing, because women were doing it more, is I think a lot of times women that were plus size women that had a hard time finding clothing on the rack, ended up getting into sewing because sewing garments for themselves because they were a different shape.
Yeah.
And what was because I have found that when I was working, a lot of the women that I knew that sewed when I was working were people that were unusual sizes for clothing, because they said that's the only way they could get clothing, because they couldn't buy it off the rack type of thing.
But I think another thing too has to do with, as sewing became more of an industry for making, ready to wear fashions and stuff like that, more women were employed, because women at the time, before there was legislation of that, could be paid a lot cheaper than a man. So you could you could have a lot of women in your workforce that were costing you pennies on the dollar for their labor, as opposed to men in there, because men would just naturally, if you're going to attract a man into doing that, you're going to have to offer him higher wages. That, of course, to the vast extent, there's still some discrimination in wages, and we know that there, but now it's pretty much equal. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman in the sewing industry, you're going to get paid the same, plus depending on the level of the job.
Now, the sewing industry, as we know, like fabric stores like Joann's that used to exist, and all these other ones, they were both a craft store and sewing store, but a lot of the fabrics they carried were geared for female clothing.
Yeah.
And a lot of the patterns that were created were for female clothing.
And it still is that way. You hear this a lot, and we're going to talk about this later on in here, but as a prelude to that, you hear a lot of people say, I want to make a quilt for my grandson, or for someone, for a male in the family who's graduating from university, or for my husband, or something like that. But the same complaint they all have is they cannot find masculine fabrics, because there aren't that many. If you go to when Walter, when you were looking at shirt fabric before we discovered this kind of thing, what was there to choose from?
Really, a lot of the shirt, this is quilting cotton that we're wearing, because it has a lot of different patterns in it, and I use it, and actually it does wash quite well. But a lot of the shirt fabrics are like poplin is a common shirt fabric. There's a couple of other kinds that I can't come to mind of that are shirt fabrics. But if you look at the patterns of those, it's squares and stripes.
Yep.
And it's or white fabric or plain fabric. There isn't a lot of fabric that is printed in color or anything like that. So,
and part of the blame for that is on males, because these shirts, and there are still many males out there today who would not wear what we're wearing right now. Too loud. They don't want, they too bright of colors, too flamboyant. However, that is changing with the generations that are coming through now.
In our generation, males maybe, but when you get into a younger set of males, they have become less inhibited, less afraid of being themselves, and or want to be more unique.
Yeah.
And they will go for brighter colors and be a little bit more daring and adventuresome.
However, having said that, manufacturers or men's clothing stores need to catch up, because now, mind you, I haven't been in a men's clothing store in quite a while to buy a shirt, but last time I was in one, I did not see, you saw a few things that might be a little bit different, but the vast majority of the shirts were all what Walter just said. You've got your checks, you got your plaids, you got your stripes into that. So maybe that's changing. Now, the other thing too is some of those stores that may be catering to a younger clientele will be a little bit more risque, but men in our age group, and I would say men probably anywhere from 50 up, are still, because we grew up in an age where those were your only choices. That's what they're still wearing. They're afraid, a lot of men are still afraid to go for color and pattern and that kind of thing. And a lot of that is conditioning in our society. But I think we're breaking out of that. And where we can see that breakout is in the sewing industry, or in people doing sewing like for garments and quilts. With more men entering it, then I think companies are going to have to start, the manufacturers of fabric are going to have to start catering a little bit more to the masculine taste with that. But then
Plus, I think the same thing is happening in sewing. Like there's the stigmatism is away from it's a female craft.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a craft, or it becomes more appealing to a wider audience that might have an interest in it. Like part of the reason I like making shirts is not so much that I love making shirts, but I like the fact that I can make a shirt that I can't buy in a store.
Yeah.
And I also can make a shirt that fits my body size, right? Because the last few years, clothing manufacturers have changed their designs so that everything fits a slim body, right?
What are you saying?
A slimmer. When I was young, when I was in my 20s, I always got slim fit. I got tailored shirts.
Slim.
I got everything because I was slim. I'm not as slim as I used to be. So I have to get what they call a more normal or what do you call it? Classic cut, I guess they call it.
We're classic.
Right. And
classic
fit shirts are stripes, white, checks. There's nothing exciting about those shirts. So
if you are a little bit on the more classic fit line, hint hint wink wink, wearing something that has a bold print on it like this kind of hides. You don't want to wear stripes, especially horizontal. Oh no, nothing said you're as big as a bridge like horizontal stripes with it. So if you wear something like this, it can be slimming.
So my motivation is that I can make something different than I can buy in the store.
Yeah.
And that's what is a lot of appeal to guys that are sewing their own clothing now, or if not even just sewing, having the ability to alter their clothes so that that they even buy in the store, rather than having to go to a tailoring company to have it hemmed or done something like that.
So let's go back to the notes here. So pandemic resurgence, they say, the COVID-19 lockdowns, everything comes back to COVID, served as a major catalyst with a surge in sewing machine sales to men who picked up the hobby for creative expression, practical garment making, or mental health benefits. Okay, well, a lot of people ended up having to work from home during COVID. And quite frankly, there are a lot of men out there still that they don't really have an outside interest beyond their own jobs. And when you've got more time on your hand because you're not commuting to the office or wherever you're working or that kind of thing, you get bored. There's only so much television you can watch. Well, some people, I suppose, could watch it all the time, but there's only so much television you can watch. So they're looking at what they could do, and they may have had a sewing machine sitting there. Maybe their wife's
or
home.
I've noticed that there are a number of men that are helping their wives out.
Yes.
In sewing, their wives are quilters or whatever, or sewing, and because of the pandemic, they were locked down, and they started helping their wives with stuff and beginning to like it
and taking more of an interest in it as a result of that. So then they talk about the generational shift, and they say Gen Z and younger men are increasingly adopting these skills to customize their wardrobes, promote sustainability, create unique fashion outside of the mainstream trends, which is, we've already touched on this, that this generation Z, they want to stand out as unique. So they don't want stuff off the rack that everybody else can buy. They want to, some of them start by customizing their clothing with, say, patches or things like that on a jacket or on their jeans or whatever. But then, when they're out there looking for something unique, well, this is unique.
Well, also, I've noticed in high-end stores, they have unique clothing that are not necessarily loud like this, that are like they've taken fabric from different types of fabric and sewn them together into a shirt type of thing. And they're charging a large amount of money for this. And if you have the means to do that, that's great. But somebody may look at a shirt like that and say, if I know how to make a shirt, I can make something like that.
I could make my own. So, yeah, because there is an assumption here that men are creative. Well, that's not true. Men are creative. And throughout history, men have been creative. Look at artists, sculptors, architects, all that kind of stuff. Those were worlds that were primarily dominated by men 300-400 years ago. Now, so men have creativity too, but I think sometimes they're raised to, well, at least our generation was, a man doesn't go, unless it's being an artist or an architect, a man doesn't explore the other arts, the fine arts, the same, because, well, that's really ladies' work, like embroidery, handwork, that kind of stuff. So they also talk in here about key drivers and platforms. Social media, of course, because in this day and age, we're all part of the social media world. And they talk about TikTok and Instagram and YouTube provide high visibility for male creators. Hashtags such as Dope Men Sew and groups like the Canadian Male Quilter Group help men connect and share work, bypassing traditional, often female-centric crafting circles. So something here that they're not saying explicitly, but implicitly, is that men have found a safe haven into some of these areas that cater to male-only clubs. Okay, I belong to several, although I'm not very active on them, Facebook groups, which are male, like the Canadian Male Quilter Group. I am a member of that. Haven't done much on it, but this is where men feel they're in a safe environment to show what they have been working on and what they've been creating, because they're showing it to other men who are doing something similar. That's not to say that women don't appreciate it, but there's a bit of hesitation there. I mean, it's a boys' club kind of a thing, and boys like our clubs,
Plus, a lot of times, I mean, not necessarily for quilters, but a lot of times for like garment sewers or something, is that we're all making male clothing, right, for ourselves or whatever, and some or not necessarily male clothing. They may be making clothing for their wives or something like that as well. But there's more of men look at things differently than women do sometimes. And so there's sort of a camaraderie, sort of like a woodworking club or something.
And that's not to say that men look at things better or have a better opinion or create than women do, but who better knows how clothes are supposed to fit a man than a man himself? Because even though some of the great fashion designers in the world, most of them are men that are making women's clothing, how do they know how those things, like, I always think it's interesting that I believe, could be wrong about this, need to AI check it, but the first bras were invented and designed by men. What do men know about ladies' undergarments? So, and I'm sure there's a whole topic in there about, the sexism of the world and the whole bit, and that really designing women's undergarments was more for men than it was for women and that kind of thing. But a man knows how clothes are supposed to feel on a male body. So it makes certain sense. Now, they talk about influential figures. 2 out of 4 of these names I know, of course, like male quilters and designers like Rob Appel and Ricky Timms. Well, I know those 2 names, but I do not know Luke Haynes, and Joe Ando Hirsch. I don't know who they are. But I think the point they're making here is that because there are more men who are rising to the top as designers in the quilting world and the garment world, that there are some role models for other men to follow.
And there are role models in this clothing sewing area too, that are men as well. And you can find more of those online than you used to be able to.
Yeah.
Of men showing how to, you can go on YouTube of men showing how to sew men's clothing. And the thing is that, like, the guy that taught me how to sew the shirts and stuff, he himself wanted to get into the sewing men's clothes, and started taking some classes in the area, and found that all the classes that were in the area were all taught by women, and they were only exclusively teaching how to sew women's clothing.
Yeah. And you can extend this even further because in the sporting world, there are top sports personalities that have come out saying that they do embroidery, they do knitting, they do crocheting, and that's been around for quite a few years. And what they were trying to show was it isn't just for women, it isn't emasculating you, it's not turning you into a femme or something like that, that this is an art form and it's open to all people regardless of their sex. So then they talk about artistic reclassification. Quilting is increasingly being viewed as modern art or soft engineering. This term I like, soft engineering. Measuring, cutting, and constructing is what they're talking as, or saying, is the definition of soft engineering, rather than strictly domestic labor, which has made it more appealing to men. Well, what do men like? Men like machines. Okay? The reason I got into quilting was not so much for making quilts as much as it was for using a sewing machine with different features on it. I was into the machine. I'm into machine embroidery, not so much for the fact that it's embroidery, but because it's a machine that can do it, and it fascinates me. My long arm, I'm fascinated by how that works as well. And that is maybe typically stereotypical of men who are always into machines and stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of engineering that goes into constructing a garment or into constructing a quilt. I mean, like I've said, quilt math hard.
It's just, yeah, embroidery to me too. Like when I was growing up, my sister, I remember my sister had a tablecloth she was making, and she did it hand embroidery, and I always liked the look of it. I thought it looked really nice. And then she started getting into machine embroidery when it was first coming out, and that even fascinated me. And ever since then, I always wanted to get to do machine embroidery.
Yeah. And why do men get into woodworking? Because there's tools and machines and things like that that they can play with and use. So this is a natural extension of that. So why men might be, certain men may be attracted to sewing because of the machining and the precision and all of that kind of thing. So then they talk about the industry response, pattern availability. Historically, men's patterns were limited to basic items like pajamas. Independent pattern companies are now releasing more diverse, fashion-forward, gender-neutral designs to meet the demand of male sewists. So the idea is now they've opened up the door to design.
And plus also the availability. It used to be you had to go to a store to purchase a sewing pattern. Like I'm just saying a Joann's or a Fabricland or, a place, that's the only place you could get the patterns, right? Or know about the patterns. Now with the internet, you can do a search for male patterns and find them. Whereas it's more available now for men.
Yeah. And also, I think there's a stigma for a man to walk into a place that is traditionally an environment where there's a lot more females, like going in a fabric store or something like that. So now if there are still men out there that want to get into it, but they may still be a little bit closeted, they can at least order online and get the stuff where traditionally they would have had to go into the store and be sheepish. I know when I first walked into quilting stores, when I got into it, I felt a little sheepish about it because the women would look at me like, what are you doing here?
Well, you had that same problem with
in the crafting community.
In the crafting community,
yeah,
when you were doing scrapbooking,
yep.
You would walk into a store and women would look at you and say, "Oh, are you here to buy something for your wife?" And we have had less of that in the
last few years. That's disappeared.
Stores. The fabric stores are a little less uptight these days when men come in.
Yeah. So then they talk about here inclusive spaces, which is kind of what we're leading to. Specialized events such as all-male quilting retreats and online forums dedicated to men who quilt are providing supportive environments for those who may feel out of place in traditional fabric shops or guilds. All I can think of is like an AA meeting. Hi, my name's Stephen. I've been quilting for 15 days. like kind of a thing, because of that stigma. But I think in recent history, and when I say recent history, in the last 5-6 years, I've noticed a definite decline in sexism when you walk into a fabric store, into a quilting shop, where now it is not unusual to see more and more men in there, whether they're coming in with their wives. And as Walter said, many of those men are taking an active part in the purchasing of whatever their wife is looking at. They will say, how about this? What about this? Kind of a thing.
And we've also noticed that there's men that have had an interest in helping with the quilting process.
Yes.
With their wives. They may have a long arm, and there are a couple of men that we know that will end up long arming their wives' quilts.
Yeah. A great team kind of a thing. And more of those type of people are coming to the surface. And again, it goes back to that idea of soft engineering or whatever. Long arm machines are an industrial machine. And, if you tie it in with a computer program with it, the whole bit, I mean, it's a toy for big boys and they like it. So, I can see why they're attracted to doing that kind of thing. So let's extend this a little further then. And the next question I put to the AI is, why would men be attracted to quilting and sewing then? And now we've kind of already talked about this, but let's see what the AI has to say. Men are increasingly attracted to quilting and sewing because these crafts offer a unique blend of technical precision, creative expression, and practical utility. Key reasons include precision and logic. Many men are drawn to the engineering aspect of quilting, like we've already said, soft engineering. Planning a quilt is often compared to a logic puzzle or a math problem where everything must fit perfectly together. High precision techniques such as foundation paper piecing appeal to those who enjoy accuracy and technical skill. So, yes, we know sewing definitely has a technical side to it, whether you're garment sewing or you're quilting. Mechanical interest. For some men, a sewing machine is viewed as a welder for textiles. They may be attracted to the machinery itself, understanding how it works, maintaining it, and mastering complex tools like long-arm quilters or industrial machines. Well, yeah, I've already said that. I like machines. I was attracted initially to the idea of sewing because I was attracted to the idea of using a sewing machine and learning how to do that. And the long arm machine that we have, pretty much the same reasons. Also, because a lot of the modern machines today are all tied in with computer technology and there's software programs for designing in it. I'm interested in computers. So that's what really hooked me into quilting more than anything else, is that machine thing. Practicality and customization. Sewing allows men to create functional items like bespoke clothing, custom gear, or repairs that are more durable than mass-produced goods. And that's what Walter was saying. The idea that men can customize a look for themselves if they know how to sew or learn how to sew. Creative outlet and fine art. Quilting serves as a medium for artistic expression, allowing men to push aesthetic boundaries and upend traditional themes. Prominent male quilters like Rob Appel and Luke Haynes are celebrated for innovative graphic and bold designs. Okay, here is something. Let's think about this for a minute. Creativity for men. Off the top of your head, name a bunch of things that women do that are creative. Well, women sew. Women bake. Women home decor. They design products for home decor or make them. There's a whole bunch of things, creative arts, really, in the broadest of terms, that you can name that women are involved with. Men. Woodworking. Well, painting. I'm having a hard time coming up with something.
Even I did stained glass for a while, and even in stained glass, it tends to be a female-oriented thing. I mean, there are some men that do it, but it's weird because there's welding involved in there
Yep.
and things like that. But if for some reason it is, but it's a bit of an art
Yeah.
as well, and it ends up having an artistic flair to it.
Yeah.
So
I suppose you could say in the world of cooking and baking, there are men in that. That's a creative outlook because, designing cakes, that kind of cooking, fancy culinary arts and stuff like that. That's a creative outlook. But there's not as many creative outlets for men, or there didn't used to be. Why? Because a lot of those creative outlets were labeled as female.
I think that the whole thing, that label of female, kind of started in the earlier, in our past generation, because prior to that, there weren't things really labeled as female, right? If you look at the medieval times, there was like leathersmiths, there was people weren't really being pigeonholed as female.
I disagree completely with that. They definitely were. Women were taught the domestic arts. They called it domestic arts. They were expected to look after the home, look after the cooking, look after the children. Men went outside of the home and worked in the fields, worked in industry later on and stuff like that. Now, that doesn't mean to say that women didn't do some of that as well. Women did work in the fields for sure, because it took everybody involved that could like stand upright and walk in those days to run the family homestead.
But like if you wanted a suit made, you always went to a tailor. You didn't go to a woman that sewed.
But that was a different type of sewing, which we've already talked on. But I think it's our society has always created roles depending on your sex. And I think now in the 21st century, I think those roles are starting to move towards being less stringent, and the lines are blurred. And depending on where you live, more so it doesn't matter. Women can be mechanics. Men can be domestic goddesses. I mean, or whatever. For that kind of thing. So I think it's blurring, but that I'm talking from a North American's perspective, and I'm talking from a Canadian society perspective. I don't think the lines are blurred in other societies in the world, in other places in the world. I think there's still very clear-cut roles, but we can only talk about that which we live, and we live here in North America with it. Creative. So that was that was creative outlet and fine art, right? Expression allowing men to push aesthetic. But yeah, we talked that. Therapeutic benefits. Like many hobbies, sewing and quilting provide a way to disconnect from daily stress. The rhythmic nature of work can induce a Zen flow state that improves mental health. Well, yeah, I would agree there are therapeutic benefits to it. And I think more men are being attracted to that, because if they work a 9-to-5 high stress job, like let's say someone in the financial world or something like that, they need something to release the tension and the stress that they have, or they're going to die. They're going to have a heart attack.
I still know lots of people that are working that don't have any hobbies.
Yep.
And they say, like, say to them, well, what are you going to do when you retire? Because I said, you don't have any hobbies.
Yeah, and I think if we go back to the point they made about the pandemic too, I think a lot of men who were like workhorses, their 9-to-5 job or whatever, 5 days a week, I think they suddenly discovered that there was a whole world that goes beyond their job, and that someday they will retire, and what are they going to do? And I think men are becoming much more of the fact that they are more than just what they do for a living with it. There is a life out there, but you have to pursue it. You have to find it. And I think quilting and sewing is one avenue they can pursue. Plus, it's relaxing.
It's an option.
Yeah, it's an option. And it does have therapeutic benefits. We all know that with it. I also think it has relational benefits too. Like we've already talked about females and males, like husband and wife teams. She pieces the quilt, he long arms it. And we know we know a lot of those couples that work that way as well. So, when you're doing something with your spouse as well, I think that brings you closer together with it. Either that or you kill them.
Yeah,
So,
well, it's possible too.
but I mean, we had common interests. We always have. But I think we have a much more of a common interest in the fact that when we go shopping for fabric, it's both of us there, or machines or things like that. Like, it's not like, okay, bye honey, I'm going to the fabric store to buy fabric, and I'm going to Canadian Tire to look at motor parts. No, we share a similar interest and play off of each other's creative talent in that way. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of couples who get into this as well. So men need this.
And I've known women that have gotten interested in building things as well. Like I know somebody that her and her husband completely renovated their house themselves. And where the women were doing more classical male roles.
But we're not talking about women, we're talking about men.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that things have changed.
Yes, things have changed, but I think back to the therapeutic benefits. Men need to, and women need it too, but we're talking about men here. I think more men are attracted to quilting and that because of therapeutic benefits. It is something very different from what they do day to day, probably in their job. So, you need to have that. Historical legacy. Men have long history in these crafts. From 19th century, sailors made woolen quilts on long voyages to soldiers quilting to pass the time between battles. Okay, that's not something I really ever thought about. I would question how many men were doing that. I think that was very rare. They're making it sound like that was fairly mainstream.
I wouldn't doubt that if you think I'm saying way back in like the Viking years and stuff like that, that was it's like making sails, right?
Yeah, but I was going to say they're talking about this as being more of a craft, which would suggest a leisure time activity. Whereas I think sailors were doing it, like if they were making sails, that was a very practical concern.
Well, maybe making woolen quilts on long voyages were a practical concern too.
Maybe, keeping warm. Or
maybe like making a sword out of metal.
Yeah, or on like soldiers quilting to pass the time between battles. Okay, I'm done I'm done killing for the day. Let's make a quilt. I don't know. I have this picture of a bunch of soldiers sitting around in the cantina, a quilting bee. I
don't know.
As opposed
the
to
way I'm
guns.
saying woolen quilts would be more like gray, dingy.
Yeah, like I don't know. I'm sure. Well, obviously, I'm sure that this did happen, but it's on what scale? I don't know. That's maybe a deeper dive into AI.
If you go into Scottish backgrounds and stuff like that, who made the
kilts?
Who designed the woolen mills and stuff like that to make quilts or to make
kilts
to make fabric?
Well, okay, that was probably men. Yeah. Okay, so maybe so. That's a whole topic maybe on its own. To pursue in a future episode. Sense of accomplishment. Seeing a complex long-term project through to completion provides a significant morale boost, and a tangible item that represents hours of dedicated labor.
By the way, who invented a sewing machine? Was it a man or a woman?
It was a man.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I did look that up, and it was a man that invented a sewing machine. This morale boost, tangible. Maybe, yeah, okay. If we look at from the point of view that are men supposed to take pride in what they make? Well, if they make something for the home, if they make something that's practical, they invent something for industry, yes. But then again, I suppose artists from way back, I'm sure Michelangelo, he looked at the Sistine Chapel after he was done. He went, I did that. I'm proud of that. That took a lot of hours to do, and I was on my back on scaffolding and painting upside down. So, yeah, I guess. I think it was. Well, we know that when you finish a quilt or a garment, yes, you have a sense of accomplishment. Um, so another aspect of this that spins off it, are there quilting patterns that appeal to men? So here you go. You've got men that want to quilt in that, but what are men attracted to as in terms of patterns? I know what I'm not attracted to. If it's a real flowery quilt, I'm not usually attracted to it. I like geometric designs. I am attracted to that, although I am geometrically challenged to a certain point when it comes to angles. But what kind of things would attract you in quilting patterns?
Yeah, I tend to like either really bright, bold colors, or more earth tones and stuff like that.
Okay, so what the AI said then is, yes, many quilting patterns are specifically designed or easily adapted to appeal to men by emphasizing geometric structures, minimalist aesthetics, and functional designs. So they say popular quilt patterns are geometric and minimalist designs. Patterns like Gentleman's Agreement is geometric. Hudson Square, these are ones I've never heard of. Rhythm and Blues. So, I mean, you could look those up and see what they're all about. But I do agree with that like there is a pattern designer and a fabric designer that we both like, and it's geometric designs, and that's Juicy Juice. Juicy Juice patterns and his fabrics especially have a very industrial geometric look to them, and I think those appeal to a lot of men, that kind of style. Modern classics, the log cabin or modern FP logger, foundation piecing logger, I guess, and half square triangles are favored for their organized and structural look. Well, my favorite thing in a quilt is a half square triangle. I like making them because they're easy to make. You can do so many different things with them in a design. If you've ever looked at any of my patterns that I've designed, the half square triangle is definitely predominant in that. Yeah. What are you attracted to in design?
That's a good question.
Why do you like making garments over quilting? Because you do lean that way. What is it about
I like making an end product that I want. And I like that's maybe not as precise.
Well, that
as
undercuts
quilting.
that.
I mean, it's making a product that I want, right?
I was going to say, though, that it's very structured. I mean, you've got pattern pieces. You cut out the pattern pieces.
I tend to like repetitive processes.
Okay, well, I think that is a characteristic of males for that kind of thing. Okay, so themed patterns. Designs featuring sports, nature, mountains, trees, or hobbies, cars, sailing are highly popular. Well, yeah, that's kind of a stereotype, I would say, like featuring sports. Yes, there is, you can get the logos of different teams and things and make quilts out of those. Nature, mountains and trees, okay. Hobbies, yes. For me, with the exception of maybe nature, I'm not attracted to any of those other things. I'm not attracted to the sports themes. I'm not attracted to cars and sailing on a quilt.
Would you think that art quilts are more popular with men than maybe traditional quilts?
For men like you who don't like precision. Now, that's not to say that art quilts can't be precise.
Yeah.
But my way of looking at art quilts is a very creative process where you start laying down fabrics on a design wall and figuring out how you're going to sew them together to create whatever it is. They're more abstract. They don't have to be abstract, but that to me, I could see as being appealing to men. Textured quilts, rag quilts, and denim quilts made from repurposed jeans offer a rugged, tactile appeal that many men prefer. I'm not sure what a rag quilt is.
Is that the one where they have the unfinished edges?
It might be. It might be. Denim quilts.
I've noticed some people that have in the past that have made quilts out of denim fabric. Of course,
Yeah.
they weigh a ton, but
Yeah. Maybe. Neither one of those two really appeal to me.
no.
But maybe.
But see, you're
in
not
general.
one of them.
No, I'm not one of them. But I'm not a man. What are you trying
you're
to
not.
imply?
You're
Is that
not
really?
somebody
I'm not
that
insulted.
appeals to.
No. Optical illusions, designs like it's all an illusion or snail trail based on the, I can't say that, Fibonacci, whatever sequence.
See. Okay, I don't know.
Often appeal to men who enjoy mathematics and clean graphics. Well, I could see that. I could see that in, because a lot of the quilts I see that men have made that design themselves do have definitely a geometric.
Yeah, or they do the optical illusion ones
Yeah,
or something like
like that. So yeah, I could see that. And even when I think about my own designing and what I'm attracted to, I like symmetry. I like nice, crisp, straight lines and things. Yeah. That's maybe why I have a hard time stepping into the world of art quilting with it, because I like precision with it. Okay, key design strategies for masculine quilts. While any pattern can work, specific choices in fabric and technique can shift the aesthetic. Fabric choice. Prioritize plaids, tartans, stripes, and solids over floral or pastel prints. Well, I'm not so sure about tartans and plaids. But I definitely do not like pastel prints.
Well, maybe this is the AI generating it because they think that flannel is more man's world.
Maybe. Well, yeah, using materials like flannel, denim, and even men's dress shirts and ties adds a personal and durable touch. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about this. I think that needs a little bit more of an explanation to it than that. I think right there you're stereotyping.
Yeah.
That, here we go back again to the kind of fabric you could only find years ago for men's shirts.
Yeah.
Plaids, tartans, stripes, solids. Although I do know a lot of men that I have seen that are into quilting tend to go to solids. They tend to shy away from prints because, and I don't know, that's because they're not really sure how to use the prints, or they just hate them. I don't know. And
or they're just cheap and they don't.
Yeah, that could be that too. Color palette. Stick to neutral tones, grays, navy, black, or earthy hues, olive green, rich browns, burnt orange. Okay, I think this is very, very stereotyped.
Yeah.
With it. This is the one thing that
it depends on how comfortable men are to break free from that stereotype.
And
because
obviously we are not afraid.
Because you get Adam So's, and his favorite fabrics are tulip
pink. Yeah, so there you go. I think though men need to leave themselves open. I mean, there's nothing wrong with liking gray, navy, and black, or the earthy hues, that kind of thing. But extend your color wheel.
And I think most men, once they get beyond the first parts of sewing, they may start off leaning towards the more masculine fabrics, but as they get more comfortable with sewing, they're more willing to break free from that.
And look at someone like Kay Fassett, his bold, in your face types of fabrics. Quilting technique. Use straight line or grid quilting rather than ornate swirls. This reinforces the structured, unfussy look of the quilt. I do not agree with that. That may be how men get started into free motion quilting or into long arm quilting or something like that. But I think they get tired of that very quickly and they want to go on and go beyond and start, trying their hand at feathers or
so whatever this thing's sourced from.
Yeah, so this is, I don't agree with what the AI is coming up with there. Functionality. Men often prefer throw or lap sizes that are practical for watching TV or using in a man cave. Do they? Do they? Um, why should a throw or a lap size be more male,
Yeah.
attractive to men? I think men make whatever they want to make.
Yeah, they make, I wouldn't doubt that there's a lot of men that get in, like, a lot of men are practical. So you want to make a shirt for yourself because either you don't like what's on the rack, or it's too expensive, or you want to make something different,
Yeah.
right? So I wouldn't doubt men go, oh, I need a new bedspread, so let's
Yeah.
let's make my own.
So they've got a link here to 33 free quilt patterns for men. This should be interesting to see what they are coming up with, what they think is a male.
It says make for men. It doesn't say.
Oh, that men would make. Okay,
Yeah.
so, all right, there.
See, that's where it's taking us. It says men, people that want to make a quilt for a man.
Yeah.
So that doesn't necessarily mean it's a man making a quilt.
So this is not very bold. This is more earthy tones and the whole bit. The design of it is very basic. Well, that's an insult to men. But look at this one. So is this. Solids.
I think men are more creative than that.
I think so. Okay, well, here we go. Warm woolies. Excellent. That's a little bit more elaborate. Outside the box. Okay. It's almost kind of a stylized log cabin-ish Bargello look. Checks. Ooh, that's ugly. Ooh, yuck. Okay, here we go again, though. Rectangles. Wow. Okay. This is a little nicer.
Boring.
Yeah, but it's got fussy cut
Yeah.
pieces that are, nature. Flying geese quilt. Well, I like flying geese, so that kind of appeals to me. But okay, T-shirt quilts. All right. Men, apparently, I am not one of them, wear a lot of T-shirts that they have picked up because of what they say on
And they
them.
have sayings on. Actually, I don't know if that's a big Canadian thing. I don't notice a lot.
I
of
think
men.
that's more American
Yeah.
than it is Canadian. But yeah, okay, whatever. Oh, plaid. Oh, God, that's ugly. No. Cowboy throw. Why? Because it's got horsies on it. Okay. Chocolate sparkle. I like the design. I'm not a fan of the color scheme. I think
You're not a brown person.
No, I'm not a brown person. But yeah, that's assuming men like
Brown.
earthy tones again,
Yeah.
like darker. Center stripes bed quilt.
Yeah, it looks boring.
Yeah. Blueberries and cream. Okay, if
Yeah.
you notice, most of these are geometric designs. Now this is
kinda
not bad.
interesting.
Plaid stars. Okay, actually that one's interesting. That's a wall quilt. Flannel rectangles. Again, that
I
geometric.
think that would look better if it had black background and bright colors.
Yes.
That's
Rectangular
kinda interesting.
shift. Okay. Straight
Yeah,
black and white
I
quilt.
don't like that one.
What's
I
with
don't like
what's with
colors.
the animal prints?
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, animal prints are more feminine because of clothing. Wearing the leopard spot dress or whatever.
Cougar look, right?
Cougar look, yeah. Striking hourglass quilt. A lot of sort of semi-solids. They do have texture. I don't know.
Ew.
Oh, that one no.
In different colors.
Yeah.
Might be okay.
Now, in different colors, this would be okay. But again, here we go. Earth
Yeah,
tones.
yeah.
Again, men like earth tones, apparently. Rhapsody in blue.
See, that looks feminine to me. But
Well, yeah, because it's got a lot of little florally
Yeah.
techniques into it. Americana wall hanging. It's not bad. Again, color scheme. Not to my sports fan. Okay,
yeah, it's got-
so novelty
yeah.
fabrics with well, maybe if somebody was
Yeah.
I would like to know though, these are okay, these have been picked by women, not men.
Yeah.
For men.
Yeah.
I would like to know what men would pick for men.
Yeah. That would be interesting.
And it goes on.
What men quilts that men would pick out.
I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Well, I like things with houses on them. I
Yeah.
think that and this is it's got like a log cabin kind of a thing happening here.
You know, I mean,
Courtyard
tools
steps
on it.
actually, but tools. Bolts of blue, no.
That's interesting.
Bundles of borders, almost, with the right colors, that could have almost an optical illusion effect to it, a tunnel-like look. But anyways, I would say that the vast majority of these are definitely picked by what women think men would like. Like I said, I wonder what men would pick for men. But whatever. And then I found something out. These are just images of quilts, same thing. Kind of a deal. Here you got, let's do the thing with a picture of an animal and put borders around it. See a lot of this, the nature thing, the animals, like the bears and the deer, the sort of that hunting motif. Okay, that's just ugly.
Yeah.
That is just okay. A basketball court in the center of it, and then basketballs around it. Oh, good God, no imagination there whatsoever. Again, though, I mean, okay, teenage boy who plays nothing but basketball all the time, probably love it. I guess it all depends on the interests that the person you're making it for has. Okay, so bottom line of all of this is that, yes, there are many more men, and it's increasing every day, going into sewing and quilting. I think men are their own worst enemy when it comes to this. I think the only thing holding men back are men themselves. I think a man who goes into any of these, into the sewing arts, the textile arts, has to have a firm grip on who he is, and he doesn't bow down to societal norms or stereotypes. I think it depends on the community they are in. Some communities are much more rigid about the roles of men and women than others, or places in the world. But I think the only thing holding back a man from getting into quilting, if it is being held back, is themselves. They, come on, aren't you over someone's going to call you a sissy? Have some self-esteem, for yourself. Don't you be dictated to.
Yeah, I could
by
see men
someone else.
Starting to sew for practical reasons,
Mhm.
right? Like they have to make a sale, or want to recover a something that's made out of fabric or something, and they can't seem to buy it at the store, and then they sort of fall into doing other projects.
Yeah, and I think too that men are socialized to think that if they're going to get into something like this, they have to make something that is practical. They're not make it just for the sake of making it. It's like when I go into a fabric store and a woman usually comes up to me and says, "Oh, that's pretty fabric. What are you going to do with it?" And that is the idea that a man has to make something for a specific purpose. And when I say to them, I don't have any plans for it, it's just pretty, I wanted it. And they look at you because they don't expect that answer. They don't know how to take that. Why you said that.
Like I do that. So they'll tell me, and I go, I hate when they ask me that question.
Yeah.
But I'll say, well, it might be a shirt, might be a bag. I'm not sure yet.
But it's the whole point that they're trying to make is because you're a man and you're buying that, you must have a very, very specific purpose for it. Not necessarily. Like when a woman goes shopping and she goes into a Home Sense or a TJ Maxx or something and looks at the housewares things, and she comes home with some thing for her house. Did she buy it because there was definitely a purpose for that? She had that in mind, or did she get it because I thought it was cute?
Just say I'm making a blanket for my favorite cow.
You shouldn't call your wife a whatever. But I mean, the point is that men can't be their own worst enemy. They have to break out of the mold that has been set from them from whatever influences in their life as they were growing up. And if you want to do it, do it. Don't be held back because you think someone's going to have a perception of you that you don't think that you're not living up to somebody else's standard. Let's put it that way.
We've even had women say, so I'll make we made these shirts or something like this. And they go, oh, I've looked at making a shirt, but I don't want to have to iron it.
Well, who says you have to?
Who said, we said that.
We don't iron our shirts.
I don't iron the shirt unless it's maybe the collar. Sometimes I might iron it, but that's about it.
Yeah. Don't have to do that. Okay, so anyways, thank you to Maureen for giving us the idea for this week's topic. If you've got an idea you'd like us to pursue and to find out more about, then please put it in the comments below or send it to me as a direct email. And we'll be happy to pursue it further because we need your ideas for So Chatty, because that's what So Chatty has become. Our topics are based on what you would like us. We'll do the work for you. Put it that way. So, any final comments from you? Anything you'd like to say? No? Okay. No. So thanks for joining us this week. I hope you got something out of this session. You can put what you got out of it or what you have to say in the comments below, and we'll talk to you next week. So see you later. Say goodbye, Walter.
Goodbye.